Good morning. It's Thursday and it's time for another Strategic Narrative Underground session, number 9 from the series that I started in late April. Thank you so much for tuning in again. My name is Guillaume Wiatr. I'm the principal and founder of MetaHelm. MetaHelm is a strategy consulting firm. We specialize in strategic storytelling. We help CEOs, executive entrepreneurs, founders of all sorts build a strategic narrative to take their business to the next level of engagement and success, whether it is outside the company or inside the company, whether you are trying to make more people buy from you or make more people join you in your projects, change your culture, transform, and so on. Over the past few weeks, we've covered some key elements of what I call the strategic narrative framework. It's a 4-story framework. If you have questions, if you're wondering about this framework, if you're just tuning in for the first time, you may want to watch the videos that I posted on YouTube. Like and subscribe, as they all say. I'll say the same. These videos walk you through the building blocks of what a strategic narrative is. 4 stories. I'll recap them very, very quickly, and then we're going to dive into our session today. The first story is called the origin story. The second story is called the opportunity story. The third story is the perspective story. And the fourth story is called the product story. Building a strategic narrative is an ambitious project. It's a very valuable thing to do for your organization, but it's also a hard thing to do. I'm not going to lie. And today in this session, I want to share principles, key principles that I have observed, followed throughout my years of exploration on this topic, principles that will hopefully help you be successful at this endeavor. So without further ado, let's get this started, and I'll share my screen with you. There you go. The key question that really strategic narrative helps you answer is, how do I build a company that people want to buy from and work with? It's really the recurring theme that all my clients come to me to explore. And I will say that in these days, products alone are not enough. If you pay attention to how people react to brands, how brands advertise, how companies are formed by the newer generation in particular, there is something more powerful that is coming at the forefront of our conversation in society. And I believe that this is inspiration. We want inspiration. We not only work just for a job, for a paycheck, but we want to work for leaders, for a team, and for a cause that gets us going. And it's not a new thing if you think about it. It's very, very old. But if you trace maybe the last 10, 20 years, there's been more and more conversation, more and more discussions about it. There's a famous book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why, for instance, but that's just one out of many others, published around 2009, that explores this topic in depth and that bring this to the to people's mind, to people's attention. I think that still to this day, we're trying to figure out how to make this work and how to activate inspiration. Personally, the first time I came across this was in 2001. I was a young consultant, and I was working for a company. I was contracted by a company called Total. Total is the #2 energy company in the world. And I was brought in to help the head of procurement to make an information system project work. Total buys huge amounts of supplies to produce energy. And so for them, the stakes were really high. They're trying to change a computer system that would hopefully save a lot of cost, because buying a lot of things actually costs a lot of things. All the processes that it involves are really time consuming. And so they brought me on board because the project was stuck. The first day on this project, I am here sitting at the top floor of this tower that you see here in Paris, in the main boardroom with the head of procurement and maybe 15 to 20 engineers, all seasoned people. And we engage in the agenda, we start talking about this project. It goes to the technical, then the product side of the project very quickly. And in a matter of minutes, I noticed that there is no cohesion. There is no understanding, communication is tough. And I tell myself, if I keep steering this towards the technical angle, which these guys hired me for, we're going nowhere. So I asked if I could try something, and they said, yeah, sure. Here's an exercise I'd like to propose. I handed out sheets of papers that size, to the participants of this meeting, and I asked them to draw the project. I asked them to draw the project because I wanted to test what was the common vision, what was the common understanding that they had about this project. And sure enough, guess what we had? Out of the 20 drawings that we posted on the big board, we had 20 different drawings. And it was very self-evident that they could not move forward without building a common understanding, without building some consensus around this project. So in the months after, I steer the project towards something totally different than providing just technical expertise. I help them build a narrative. At the time, I didn't call it like that. I called it differently. But with hindsight, what I noticed is that this narrative that we actually built, I helped them build a narrative, the narrative that we built together, helped them do several things. It removed confusion and complexity. It built focus. And it went just beyond the idea that it was going to work just because their software, their product was technically more advanced. First, we needed to catch the attention of the potential suppliers, users, the community around the supply chain, to realize that we started to believe in something new for the company. And then from there, we were able to increase adoption and make the project successful. Total had invested 20 million euros on this project, which was, for the time, and still is, a pretty significant amount of money. And thanks to the narrative, we saved this project. It's a pattern that I've seen, repeated with many of the companies I work with and many of the companies I don't work with. So again, three things: a strategic narrative removes confusion, creates focus, and goes beyond marketing. This is the model that I've been building to help you do this. And if I look at it, when I look at it, the story was, a little bit over 20 years ago today. And now I can look at it with hindsight and decode it now with a system that I didn't have at the time. And now I'm able to help people replicate similar successes. And if I look at what the picture looked like for them, it was probably looking like this, right? The product story on the bottom right of this model was just huge, was just the only thing that people would think about. And that's where they were, everybody was mired into this, completely tangled into conversations that lost everyone in translation. Everyone had forgotten about the origin of the project, the bottom left quadrant here. That's just let me refer to the other visual. After a few months, they had all forgotten about why in the first place they were doing this project. They're so focused on things like ROI and speed of delivery and things that were starting to be, really meaningless to people. There was no clear perspective. There was no clear philosophy around how to approach this. And in the end, the opportunity that we were trying to started to become really unclear. So all the work that I did there was just help them rebalance this out. I didn't have the right answers. They came up with the answers. But the whole work that I did back in 2001, was to rebalance those 4 stories. That's why I believe that a good narrative is a system of stories that are co-constructed socially, and that people not only know how to tell, but also live by. So it's a question of behaviors. In the recent week, I had a chance to reflect on this, and I thought, wait a minute. It sounds like what I'm trying to say here is the mechanism that is typically used by movements. When you think about social movements, artistic movements, business movements, there is always political movements too, obviously. There's always a narrative behind it. And in fact, I like to say that people will buy a story, but they will sometimes die for a narrative. They'll do crazy stuff. It turns out that when you build a narrative, when you build a new one, you inspire people to take action. So that's where we are as of today. And this is great, but there are conditions to make this work. And here are a set of principles that I pulled that I'm still working on. So this is really fresh thinking here. My goal here will be to write my own manifesto, my own set of principles that I would encourage people to use when building a narrative. So we're going to walk through them. There are, as of today, 6 of them. I have about 4 or 5 more in preparation, but given our time constraint today, I want to walk you through the first 6. So the first principle is we seek to grow our impact before we seek to grow our business. And there is a famous quote that made me think of this one by Walt Disney, and it goes like this: we don't make movies to make money, to make more money. We make money to make more movies. Which gives an interesting layer of meaning here, which is that movies have an impact, have something extra. They have a power on society that is really worth pursuing. And to do that, to have that impact, you need money. Most companies think about it the other way, but with the increase of attention that we have on purpose, the rise of purpose, we hear, now it's very common to hear about companies declaring that they are purpose driven. Even banks' investment fund are making a condition, to get investment to be purpose driven. And so I think there is really value here in asking ourselves, okay, we want to grow this business, but really, what are we trying to change? Impact can be, multiple, a multitude of things. It can be social impact, it can be economic impact, it can be, environmental impact. The list is long. But I think that there is something there that should really be kept in mind if you want to build a narrative that is authentic, that is genuine, and that will make people care about, that people will care about. Okay, the next principle is we advertise our beliefs before our product. And this is very much tied to what I call the perspective story. If you want to sell Bible to people, you have to make sure that first they believe in the religion that they're Christian, say, right? That's what the Bible is for, Christians. So if you try to say Bible to people who don't believe in the same religion, chances are it's not going to work, obviously. So with this principle here, we want to make the product the tangible expression of our perspective, our beliefs. And I see that playing a really important role, especially with the development of technology-based product. In the example of Total, 20 years ago, that's what we're trying to do. But I quickly realized, and I made everybody quickly realize that the construction of this product was kind of going all over the place because we didn't have a set of shared beliefs. We didn't have a common belief system. And so we were mired into all this conversation. We're stuck into that project because we didn't have a common foundation for what we believe that was most important. The third principle is we explore our personal experiences. And this principle, if you followed my framework, ties directly into the origin story. That's what I mean by this. This exploration is not just an exploration exclusively reserved for the founder of the project or the creator, the innovator, the entrepreneurs. It's for everyone to explore. It's possible that an organization stem from the realization of the founder. So in my previous talks, for instance, I used the example of Volvo. When the president of Volvo lost a relative in a car crash, he decided that safety should be the #1 priority for the brand, for the company. When the founder of Netflix decided to start Netflix, it was because one day he tried to return a videotape at the video store, and he got fined for returning it too late. And he thought, this is unfair. We have to have a different system. We shouldn't be penalized because we want to enjoy a movie. And so he started Netflix based on the idea that people could keep their movie as long as they wanted. So there is a very, very strong connection here. If you go with this principle, you will create a narrative that is emotionally resonant. It will create a deep connection with your participants. It will make people think about something differently. It will show them a new way of looking at a project and an opportunity. Principle number 4 is we co-create. Keep in mind, most people think that narrative is a piece of communication. They equate it to a story. So if you think about it this way, sure, you can delegate it to someone and it's become really this product that somebody can create, in a vacuum, maybe ask for a little bit of feedback, and there you have it. But that's not what a narrative is. A narrative is meant to call people to action. It's meant to turn your audience into participants. So a narrative is just socially co-created. Why do we believe that recycling things after we've used them? I have a pen here. Why do we believe that recycling is a good thing? It's because the belief is shared now. We socially believe that recycling is a good thing. It turns out the numbers showed it's not exactly right anymore, but there is an example of what a co-created narrative looks like. There are so many others, of course. Principle number 5, we challenge the wisdom that others accept as truth. If you're going to build a company, if you're going to build an organization based on common wisdom, I'm asking you, what's the point? You're basically doing the same thing as other things might do. But it's very likely that you may have a slightly different perspective or actually completely disagree. In that case, challenging the wisdom that others accept as truth will set you as someone who disagree with the norm. It might be a little scary, but it will create differentiation. It will help you stand out. It can be risky, again, but it's really worth it. So that's one of the key elements that makes a narrative successful. And the 6th one, we take ownership in building the narrative. This is not a short-term game. This is not a short game. This is not something that you can make up in 2 days. If you have an existing narrative and maybe you want to clarify it, sure, you can clarify a narrative, optimize it in a matter of hours or a couple days if you go through a structured process. And that's mostly a communication exercise. But what I'm talking about here is a leadership exercise, is a change exercise. It impacts behaviors. It's also, it also requires taking the risk to make assumptions, to look at what you do, your business, as I said, in a completely different way. And so that will require you to own this process, because guess what? You're going to run into setbacks. You might not be true right away. You might want to experiment things. And so for this, if you don't own this process in the long run, chances are it's never going to happen. Most of my clients come to me for something that was actually surprising to me at the beginning. They come to me for accountability. They want an accountability partner to help them go through the hurdle, the ups and downs of this process, because they know that it only works if you get to the end. These are my 6 first principles. I hope they provoke some thoughts here. As always, I have a question for you. How will you build your strategic narrative? Where do you think you might want to start? Let me know. For those participating to this call, I'm inviting you to unmute your microphone and maybe share some thoughts here. But behind my question is, what comes kind of intuitively? Where might you start?
Guillaume, I have a question. When you talk about a strategic narrative, like some of us are in really large organizations where you don't have control over the strategic narrative. Do you see this also applying to the individual? I mean, some people talk about, your brand as a person. Mm-hmm. I mean, so this sort of thing could be something that you create for yourself as an employee, or what, rather than like say the someone who runs a whole organization, right?
Yes. So the answer is yes. And I like how you framed it, Patricia, because I see them as these are as Russian dolls, if you want. The small doll, what I'm talking about, the small, bigger doll that goes inside. And so the small doll, maybe the small doll is the individual level, the big doll is the group level, because there are more people. That's what I mean by that. It's not a question of importance. It's actually a question of size. But if you don't have a small doll in the big doll, you don't have a set of Russian dolls. And so I think it's the same for strategic narrative. It's the equation, it's the synergy, it's the system that is built because people have a sense of what their narrative should be, and you should always, of course, it's a good advice to work on your own personal strategic narrative, especially nowadays in a society where we're really, you might have heard about the term, the gig economy, where everybody can be a leader, everybody is enabled to be a leader, has the tools to start something on their own. So yes, it's a good idea to start with yourself, but it's always in connection with the organization that you're part of. And it's up to you to decide if you want to go with the flow. Maybe the organization doesn't have such a great narrative. It's kind of soul searching. It's, for some large organizations, they are actually very much challenged these days. They're on the cusp of survival, and it's up to you to propose it, right? And I've worked and heard, from people who've had really great success in doing so, going to management and say, I think there might be something else here. I've been thinking about new ideas, new ways to look at things. If you are in the proper culture, if you're in a culture that fosters that, you might be successful. If the culture is not set for that, your chances are relatively, much lower, actually relatively slim. So, but I think
you need to get yourself in a different culture.
Maybe you need to change job. It's up to you to, I always challenge this because I work with a lot of people who are sometimes dissatisfied about the way the organizations work. And I challenge them to think about how their narrative affects this perception, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's just, it's a system, right? It's an equation. It's just not somebody's, just one person's responsibility. However, I believe that if you are in an organization that is, like a pyramid, there is a leader. Not all organizations are structured like this. Some of them are actually self-organized with clusters of hierarchies. But if you are in an organization that is built like that, it's really the responsibility. The assumption is that it's the responsibility of leadership to give direction, to bring that sense of meaning. and to call people to action and say, hey, this is our opportunity, this is our purpose, this is our philosophy, and this is how our product, our systems, our processes are going to support this narrative.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope these 6 principles helped you think about how you want to go about your narrative. They're still fairly high level, but in the coming days, I will be adding, first of all, an additional set of 4 or 5 of them. And then I will work on clarifying them and hopefully publish them in the book manuscript that I'm working on, a pattern language for strategic narratives. Thank you so much for tuning in.